In 2019, YouTube was caught violating the Child Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPPA. Since settling, YouTube has enacted new policies that are meant to serve as a smokescreen so they can dodge responsibility and scapegoat creators. As such, for my own protection, it is my obligation to advise you that this video is not aimed at children. My target audience is not children. Parental discretion is advised. Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and welcome back to Sentinel Reviews. Today, our look at countermeasures continues with Series 3, released in July of 2014, directed by Ken Bentley. Countermeasure Series 3 once again stars Simon Williams as Group Captain Ian Gilmore, Pamela Salem as Professor Rachel Jensen, Karen Gledhill as Dr. Allison Williams, and Hugh Ross as Sir Toby Kinsella. As always, I'm doing these unscripted, so there is a blanket spoiler warning in place. If you don't wish to be spoiled, in the description box below is the link to Big Finish's website where you can buy Countermeasure Series 3. And this time around, I really need to emphasize that there is going to be massive spoilers for Series 3. There are some huge revelations towards the end of this story, and Series 3 ends on a cliffhanger that will lead right into Series 4. So, to set the stage for my review of Series 4, I need to spoil some things. Without any further ado, let's just jump right in. Series 3 opens with Changing of the Guard by Matt Fitton. So, after the events of Sins of the Fathers in Series 2, we are now dealing with the repercussions of that story. Toby has been temporarily removed from his position as the supervisor of countermeasures. Remember, Rachel's in charge. Toby's just kind of the supervisor and government liaison. And Templeton has been placed has filled his position temporarily. But man, he is trying his hardest to make it permanent. There is a hearing in regards to Toby's actions going on, and the team is trying to conduct business as usual in the meantime. So there's two plots going on here. We have the A plot, which is Templeton's hearing, and the B plot, which is the team trying to conduct business as normal and solve a case. I'm sorry, the B plot really is not all that interesting or engaging. So the really quick rundown. Countermeasures, or I've been wanting to do this, but I keep forgetting what the abbreviation was. The ICMG, the Intrusion Countermeasures Group, has been asked by Scotland Yard to help investigate a local mob boss who is trying to, take over all of the it's a turf war. It's a turf war. But he always seems to have an alibi, and he's always seemed to be seen in dozens of places at once. Well, spoilers, this mob boss is using alien technology to clone himself. And that's pretty much it. Although, the actor who plays the mob boss, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting his name, and I just closed my browser, so I can't look it up without looking awkward. But he does a good job. It's just, this is not a very compelling mystery or story. I think part of it is it's so bog standard. Even when Countermeasures has tackled more bog standard stories in the past, they've usually done it in a unique way. And this one, nope, there's nothing unique about it. I think the other problem is that just given what else is going on in this story, this plot point just pales in comparison. Which is also kind of a shame, because this is mostly where Allison's focus in the story is, especially in the second half. That being said, despite the B plot being kind of dull and not engaging, the A plot, Toby's hearing, is spectacular. We have now spent 2 box sets with these characters. We're on our 3rd one. So, seeing them grow and develop like they have to get to this point, it's really compelling. There's a lot of character drama, and the performances are so strong, especially Rachel. Like, there's a really good moment here where Rachel just shows how badass she is, and it further cements why she's my favorite character in this series. So Templeton is running things very different from Sir Toby. He sees himself as in charge. He wants to control countermeasures with an iron fist, and he is fighting tooth and nail to keep that control. So just as an example, there was a story that happened, quote unquote, off screen. Right before this story begins, something involving an oil rig, and Ian ended up saving a lot of lives. Templeton demands that Rachel reprimand Ian over the loss of the equipment, and he deems the lives insignificant. Like, there is no holds barred with Templeton, and Philip Pope is just utterly slimy and disgusting. It's a great performance. Like I said, Templeton is a character you're supposed to hate, and Philip Pope does such a good job of conveying that. And it's like, in series 2, Templeton did a good job of hiding just how reprehensible it was, but you could always tell it was there. In series 3, he's done hiding. Like, towards the climax of the story, tying into the B plot, he says that nothing can be done without his approval, and then vanishes. He even goes so far as to say, because Ian's trying to get his battalion together, that anyone who does anything without his approval or disobeys his orders will be shot. Anyway, I started this by talking about one of my favorite Rachel moments in this story, just showing what a badass she is. So right after their earlier conversation, the one where Templeton demands she reprimand Ian, he comes into her lab. And, after their brief conversation about the B plot, he tells her, "I hope you haven't taken my little talk this morning to heart." And Rachel, without blinking, without hesitation, says, "Oh, it's okay. I don't pay attention to anything you say." And you can just hear the smugness in her voice. Like, much like with Toby, Rachel is really the only one who does not take any flack. Speaking of Toby, we do see a lot of his hearing, too, and Hugh Ross also gives another great performance here. Basically, at the start, he tells Ian he's not worried, because these are government officials working in the government that Toby knows that he rubs elbows with. So it's like, he imagines this will be very quick, very easy. And then we learn Templeton engineered the hearing so that new officials that Toby's never interacted with would run it. Like I said, Templeton is trying to keep control of countermeasures, so he is trying to stack the deck against Toby and, the team. And the hearing scenes are also really good. Like, Rachel and Allison are called in to testify, and the committee does a good job of turning their words against them. The committee's led by a man named Heaton. He only plays a part in this story here, but he will play a huge role in Series 4, so just remember him for right now. But there's also another scene with him and Toby where he essentially tries to coerce Toby into a partnership, and Toby steadfastly refuses. Even in the face of, overwhelming odds, Toby never breaks. He never falters. And again, Hugh Ross is just brilliant like he was in Series 2. Changing of the Guard is a promising start to Series 3. Like I said, the B plot is not that interesting, but the stuff in the A plot more than makes up for it. Like, I don't even mind the B plot stuff just because the A plot stuff is so good. Justin Richards is up next with The Concrete Cage. The team is called in to investigate the death of a foreman at the building site of a new block of flats. Tower of flats? You know what? I'm just going to use the American nomenclature, apartment complex. As they investigate, the team learns that the entire construction team has been experiencing all manner of strange side effects, including headaches, sudden increases in temperature, and the hallucination of a mysterious old woman. What's going on? Well, of course, the team is bound to find out. My biggest critique with this story is that Series 3 has a narrative thread going through it that does not extend to this story. So, we have 3 stories that add up to a plot, and then we have this one, which is just filler. It's decent filler. It's not particularly bad. There are some things I'm going to kind of criticize, but it doesn't connect to the rest of what's going on in Series 3. Except for one thing. So right at the beginning of this story, the team talks about how Toby is back. You know, after Templeton was booted from his position, filling Toby's place, and then subsequently fired, something everyone relished. But now that he's back, Allison doesn't trust him anymore. You know, after the events of changing of the guard, how he played his cards close to his chest, she she just doesn't trust him anymore. That's really all there is to it. You know, she said, what was I forget what exactly she said, but it was something along the lines of, it only just occurred to me that he's back. With Templeton, it was easy to get nostalgic for the good old days, but now that Toby's back, and initially it doesn't go anywhere, this particular plot line. Like, a couple of times she'll make snide comments to Toby or in regards to him, but it doesn't really go here. It's mostly dropped in the next story, and in a weird full circle way, it kind of comes back into play in the finale. Overall, though, I'm going to talk about Allison a lot in the next story after this, so let's wait till that. Um, I will say, though, the tension and the atmosphere in this story is really great. Like I said, the construction team and then later the countermeasures team have these weird hallucinations of an old woman sitting by her fireplace, you know, because the building site of this apartment complex was a town that was decimated during the Blitz in World War II. So it becomes very likely that what they are seeing is sort of a vision of what happened in World War II. In fact, later in the story, Ian and Rachel get stuck in the hallucination of the Blitz. And where do I want to go from there? Because, you know, while Ian and Rachel are investigating, you know, the building itself, the apartment complex, Allison is talking to the local historian who's been studying the town for some time. And first of all, the historian is a really fun character. He's very quirky, but it's in a fun way. That being said, as we learn more about the hallucination of the old woman and what exactly happened to her during World War II, they don't try to hide it. It becomes very obvious what his role in that particular mystery was. Although that entire mystery itself feels kind of like a back thought. Like they were more focused on um the the hallucinations themselves and what was going on, and then this mystery about who this old woman is that everyone's hallucinating suddenly gets revealed. That being said, it does have a very poetic ending, and I think the ending was handled really well. What wasn't handled well was the explanation for the hallucinations that we eventually get. And kind of spoilers again, I am going to spoil what happens in this mystery. Before we start, I want to say I am not a scientist. I am not a geologist. I've had no scientific study beyond high school. So honestly, something like this, I don't know if it's actually possible, but it sounds very far-fetched. And given this is a Doctor Who spin-off and some of the scientific effects, scientific studies, principles, whatever, that come up throughout Doctor Who, for me to draw the line and say, wait, what? Yeah, this even by Doctor Who's standards, it seems really out there, and it kind of pulls me out of my suspension of disbelief a little bit. So what we find out is that the people in charge of this apartment complex have been cutting all sorts of corners. Like, they did a basic geological survey, but then never followed up on it. And what we learn is underneath the foundations, there is a layer of sheetrock with a very high metallic alloy. I think they said it's very magnetic. I don't remember what exactly it was. And it's very concave, so it's kind of reflective. And what ended up happening is the effects of the full moon, because most of these incidents of madness, as they talk about, these hallucinations, happened around the full moon. The sheetrock reflects the full moon back, and, you know, it kind of acts like a high tide on the fluids in the brain. And then during the Blitz, the sheetrock was cracked, allowing it to absorb some of the memories of what happened at that time. Yeah, I don't think that's how any of that works. But like I said, I'm not a scientist, so, I don't even know if the full moon, which affects the tides, as we know, acts like that on the fluids in the brain. But, this story is a decent enough mystery. It's got some compelling elements to it. Like I said, the atmosphere is really good, but once we start getting the explanation, it kind of took me out of the story. A lot. Next up is The Forgotten Village by Ken Bentley. So, you know, back at HQ, Allison has received news that her father has been in a serious accident. Her father, who she's been estranged from ever since she left her hometown, and Toby forces her to take a leave of absence and go see him and settle her affairs. Basically citing changing of the guard. He says if left unattended, one's past has a way of creeping up on one. And first of all, this is the first story I've talked about, I think, that's been written by Ken Bentley. I've mostly been familiar with his work as a director, so, to see he's also done stuff as a writer is kind of interesting. I know he's done a couple other things. I think he's done at least one more countermeasure story that we'll get to, but, as another example, in the Big Finish Classics range, he penned the adaptation of The Island of Dr. Moreau. And for what I presume is his first outing, at least as far as I know, this is a decent story. The only thing I think I'd say is it's very slow to start. Like, it takes a while to get going, and I think the first half is the weakest part of this story, just because so much time is spent setting the stage, a lot longer than I think was necessary, and then there are just plot points that don't really go anywhere and don't even lend themselves to the later half of the story. Like, for example, in her hometown, Allison meets an ex-boyfriend that she kind of reconnects with. And that actually brings me to one of the big things about this story. This is a fairly Allison-centric story, as you can kind of tell from the cover. And countermeasures really needed that. If I'm being honest, Allison has kind of been the weak link in countermeasures. She's never been bad. I've never found her bad. And Karen Gledhill has always given great performances, but there hasn't really been a lot for her to do, because she's a scientist. And Rachel is a scientist. So, and with Rachel in charge of countermeasures, that often makes Allison Rachel's assistant. And more often than and more often than not, Allison just kind of feels redundant most of the time. The only time where she really kind of works is when the team splits up in stories and, she's on her own, really separate from Rachel. Like, the Fifth Citadel in Series 2 is a great example of this. When the team splits up, which they are for most of the story, she's paired off with Ian, and she's really good there, just because she has stuff to do. So this story, really focuses on Allison, her estrangement from her father, and, her thoughts about her hometown. Of course, there's no rest for the wicked, and Allison eventually finds there's a mystery going on in her hometown. Her father begins showing signs that look like dementia, but then slowly the rest of the town begins showing these signs as well, which forces Allison to call the team in. And again, this is where the story starts really picking up. Interesting to, and then when Toby eventually finds out about, that there is something in fact going on in Allison's hometown, which he finds out from a briefing from a general, he has it quarantined off. Like, no one's allowed in or out. It's that serious. What is going on? How to approach this? Because this is, in regards to my spoiler warning at the beginning of this review, this is where the big spoilers are going to start coming in. Oh, before I do, real quick, it just, it's been a while. It's been nearly 2 stories since we've seen Toby be an outright bastard. And we get it again here. There's a minor plot about a reporter trying to figure out what's going on in this town. And boy, Toby just, you can tell he's missed doing things like this. Anyway, we eventually get sort of our explanation. A Soviet satellite has crashed in. No, 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 no. Before we do, there's one more scene I want to highlight. So Allison finally confronts her father about why she left and, her estrangement from him. And it's kind of stereotypical. Basically, Allison's father is a farmer, and he wanted a boy to help around the house and stuff, to help her on the farm and stuff. But Allison's mother gave birth to her, after which it was apparently a very difficult pregnancy, and she couldn't bear children anymore after Allison, which, Allison always perceived as leading her father to resent her. And this is all done masterfully in a brilliant monologue written by Bentley, performed by Karen Gledhill. And she mentions that she spent all her life trying to figure out what went wrong with her mother, to fix her for her father, which is why she became a scientist, which is why she tried to earn his approval, but he never gave it to her. So ultimately, she left her hometown for Cambridge and never looked back. And then like I said, it's just a really well done, very quiet scene with, again, just a master performance from Karen Gledhill. And then we get the explanation, which I kind of already started to talk about. A Soviet satellite accidentally crashed into Allison's barn. This satellite was trying to weaponize magnetism. It sounds ridiculous, but it's not as ridiculous as the concrete cage, so it's still kind of feasible. But, it was never supposed to be used. The Soviets found out that this type of weapon wasn't feasible. So basically everything that happened was an accident. And there's this climax where an agent tries to reclaim it, running into the countermeasures team. And when she takes Rachel hostage, this agent, Ian kills her. And that's where we get some big things. Allison suddenly collapses because she's repeatedly gone to the barn throughout this story and repeatedly been exposed to the satellite. And at the end, Allison has been hospitalized. Her mind has been completely destroyed. And from the concrete cage, that little plot thread I mentioned where she was distrustful of Toby, that comes back into play because now it's spread to Rachel. She blames Toby for what happened to Allison. And it's another powerful scene where she basically lashes out pretty violently at Ian and Toby for the events of what happened in this story. Like I said, the Forgotten Village takes a while to get going, but once it gets going, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Like I said, much like the changing of the guard with the A plot and the B plot, the phenomenal second half of the Forgotten Village makes up for the underwhelming first half. And Series 3 concludes with Unto the Breach. And it's a John Dorney story. When your box set has a finale, you get John Dorney to write it. The man is just a certified hit maker. I actually prefer his box set stories to his single stories, like, say, in The Main Range or something, just as an example. And this story sets the ground for Series 4. So before I get into the summary proper, we get a little more of what happened with Allison. The effects of the satellite have destroyed her mind so much that she pretty much has total amnesia. She doesn't know who she is. She doesn't know anything about her life. She doesn't know who Rachel is. Rachel visits her every day, and she never remembers these visits. This is how bad her mind was destroyed. But, there's enough about that for right now. Despite being incapacitated, this is not the last we'll see of Allison Williams. because the team has to take on their most dangerous mission yet. And like Peshka back in Series 2, they're going international. So the countermeasures and Toby have received intel that an alien has been found in East Berlin. And the mission now becomes, because obviously the Germans are so occupied with trying to study this alien, the team becomes Rachel has to be escorted behind enemy lines to confirm that there is in fact an alien. And they either need to get it out of Berlin or incapacitate it. And now Rachel is operating on mistrusting Toby, something that will be really important throughout this story. Oh, shoot! Along with the alien, they learn that the alien is being experimented on by a scientist named Maria Yeager in ties to a mysterious operation called Project Othello, something that will become extremely clear as we go on. And as soon as the team is in Berlin, the tension is up to 15, and it never lets up. The tension is amazing. This is a true Cold War era sci-fi edge of your seat thriller. And once the tension starts going, it never lets up through the end of the story. As we find out, so many things happen. For example, their agent in West Berlin kidnaps Ian, forcing him into a car, basically saying, this was the least suspicious way we could meet you. To Toby trying to investigate files to figure out more about this scientist, Maria Yeager, to what we find out with Allison, which I will talk about in a little minute. Like I said, this story ends on a cliffhanger that will lead us into Series 4. But we get the truth eventually. This entire mission has been a trap. So, Maria Yeager, the scientist experimenting on the alien, first of all, there is no alien. Maria Yeager is actually a brain surgeon who specializes in a new kind of operation that puts remote-controlled electrodes in the brain that allows her to activate and function different synapses to influence thoughts. Because remember, true mind control is not making the person do whatever you want. True mind control is influencing someone based already on how they think, in order to, so that they think they came up with the idea themselves. I hope I explained that good. Meanwhile, Allison is undergoing an experimental surgery to, recover her mind by getting remote control electrodes put into her brain. And who is orchestrating this surgery? Templeton. Yes, he's back in an extremely minor role that'll again pay off in Series 4. So, like I said, the alien mission was a trap to get Rachel there, so they could similarly perform the operation on her and send her back to British soil. Like I said, these electrodes are meant to influence people into thinking a certain way to the point that they came up with the idea themselves. Project Othello. Because that's what Iago did to Othello. And as the layers get peeled back, as we learn more and more, the tension just keeps rising. For example, their contact who was trying to help them get to this alien has really been working against them. He's even been working against Maria Yeager, because this is not, like a Cold War thing. Shoot, what was his name? I'm sorry. The contact. He's been playing for a far bigger power. And it leads to this absolutely jaw-dropping, shocking cliffhanger, which is also really well done because no music plays over it. And just it plays how haunting it is. I cannot. Like, the atmosphere and the tension is the star of this story. You feel so uneasy every second of the way. You want to know how it ends, and it doesn't end well. Basically, after Ian gets captured at the border of the Berlin Wall, Rachel, thinking, being influenced by these devices now in her brain, believes Toby is responsible because it's manipulating her mistrust of Toby. So she accuses Toby of being a spy and passes through back into West Berlin. Sorry, um, you know, unhindered. And then we get the ending. Allison is back in full health. She's operating like she was before the events of the Forgotten Village, before her mind was destroyed. She seems completely normal. And she has an exchange with Templeton, who she calls Sir Toby. Oh god, this story. This is possibly one of the darkest stories John Dorney ever wrote. And, again, for a Cold War sci-fi thriller, it's so haunting. It's just brilliant. As always, the story ranking first. So I think I'd rank these with the Concrete Cage being the weakest, just because it doesn't tie into the plot at all of Series 3. And then the Forgotten Village, just for having a really slow first act. And then Changing of the Guard and Unto the Breach being the best story. Now, from memory, before I started re-listening to these, I didn't recall Series 3 at all. Excuse me. I didn't recall Series 3 at all. So, which led me to believe going into this that Series 3 was one of the weakest releases in Countermeasures. Not the case. Really, listening to this again, Series 3's biggest problem is that while it's really good, it's just wedged between two really great series, Series 2 and Series 4. But that's mostly from memory. When I re-listen to Series 4, we'll see if my opinions change on it. Heck, I think I might find Series 2 better than Series 3 better than Series 2 now that I've re-listened to them both. But yeah, no, Countermeasure Series 3 is where things start to get real. And even the theme reflects that. They're using a new orchestration for the Countermeasures theme that's different from the ones in Series 1 and Series 2. And while I still prefer the Series 1, Series 2 theme, I really think the theme for Series 3 I really think the theme for Series 3 is very fitting of the mood and the tone that Series 3 is trying to set. The performances are all really solid. Each cast member gets they're all great, and this time they each get a moment to shine. Sir Toby, Hugh Ross as Sir Toby Kinsella gets to shine in Changing of the Guard. Simon Williams as Group Captain Gilmore gets a few moments to shine throughout the set. My two favorites are in The Concrete Cage, where he's the one who figures out all of these mysterious incidents take place around the full moon, and in Unto the Breach, where there's a few good moments. I'm trying to figure out which one I like the most. Karen Gledhill as Allison Williams obviously gets to really shine in The Forgotten Village, excuse me. And Pamela Salem as Rachel I think she's the show stealer in this set. Like I said, she has those great moments in Changing of the Guard. There's the really phenomenal ending of The Forgotten Village. And pretty much all of Unto the Breach, especially the scene with the quote-unquote alien. I didn't mention this, but basically the alien is actually a German soldier who's had surgery performed on him to look like an extraterrestrial. And Rachel, thinking this alien, again, because at this point she's already had her brain, the electrodes installed in her brain without anyone knowing, she doesn't see how human he is. So she, thinking it's the best possible outcome, it's for the greater good, she kills him. And of course, the ending where she accuses Sir Toby of being a spy in West Berlin. Man, I would recommend Series 3. The problem is there's a narrative thread to Countermeasures. So in order to listen to it, you do have to listen to all to the entire series. But those are just my thoughts on Series 3. What are yours? Have you heard it? Please start a conversation in the comments below and join me next week. Or, no, sorry, join me next month, same time, hopefully, where it's not the end of Countermeasures, but it's the end of the original series with Series 4. Until then, remember to like, comment, subscribe, click the bell next to subscribe to get notifications when I upload, and in the description box below, along with the link to Big Finish's website where you can buy Countermeasure Series 3, you'll find the link to my Twitter where you can follow me and get updates on the channel. This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and I'll see you guys next time.